There are teachings that inform the mind, and then there are teachings that awaken the heart, that dissolve the very sense of me that seeks. Among those rare masters of silence and truth, Sri Ramana Maharshi stands as a radiant mountain, still, unmoving, yet transforming all who approach. He did not teach through philosophy, but through presence. He said very little, yet his silence said everything. Today, let's sit together in that silence and reflect on some selected teachings from his recorded conversations, compiled in the timeless book. Talks with Sri Ramana Maharshi. Each of these is not merely a statement, but a doorway into the self, the peace that never changes. 1. The real obstacle is the mind. In Talk 13, a visitor asked Maharshi, "What are the obstacles which hinder realization of the self?" He replied simply, "They are habits of mind, the mental impressions, the vasanas." The visitor asked again, "How can one overcome these mental habits?" Ramana said, "By realizing the self. No technique, no struggle, just realization." This teaching seems like a paradox, but it reveals something profound. You cannot fight the mind from inside the mind. Every attempt to fix yourself strengthens the illusion of I am broken. Ramana invites us to turn our gaze inward to find the source of the mind itself. When we realize the self, the pure awareness from which all thoughts rise and fall, the habits of mind dissolve naturally, like mist before the morning sun. He said, "The self alone is. Nothing needs to be added or removed. What is unreal fades when what is real is seen." How different this is from the modern idea of self-improvement, fixing, managing, optimizing. Ramana's way is not to manage the waves, but to discover the ocean beneath them. For those of us who've spent a lifetime chasing peace in the external world, relationships, success, spiritual techniques, this realization comes as a deep sigh of relief. You don't have to keep fixing yourself. You only have to see who you truly are. 2. Self-inquiry, the pathless path. In another conversation, Maharshi said, "Instead of wanting to know this and that, seek to know the self. Ask, who am I? At the end of the quest, you shall find that the ego disappears, letting the eternal self shine." The question, "Who am I?" is not meant to be answered by words. It is a mirror that turns your attention inward. Usually, when a thought arises, "I am sad, I am happy, I am old, I am spiritual," we identify with it. Ramana says, ask instead, "Who is this I?" When you trace that sense of I inward, you find that it is not solid. It is only a thought, appearing and disappearing. The true self, however, is that silent awareness in which even the I thought arises. This is not philosophy, it is direct seeing. He said, "Find the source of the mind, and all doubts will disappear." Self-inquiry is not about chanting, "Who am I?" repeatedly. It is a gentle, watchful returning again and again to the awareness behind every experience. In silence, the false self dissolves. What remains is the stillness that Ramana called the heart. He said, "The heart is not physical, it is spiritual. It is the seat of consciousness. It is called the heart not because it is the organ in the body, but because it is the source from which all thoughts arise." For a seeker after 50, who has seen the noise of ambition and the impermanence of relationships, this question, "Who am I?" is no longer theoretical. It becomes urgent, personal, a call from the depths. It is the question that ends all other questions. 3. The nature of happiness. In Talk 3, Ramana was asked, "Why is man not happy?" He replied with childlike clarity, "If a man thinks his happiness is due to external causes, then, if he is devoid of possessions, his happiness should be nil. But look, in deep sleep, when he is devoid of possessions, he is still happy. Happiness is inherent in man and is not due to external causes." Think about that. In deep sleep, when there is no wealth, no body, no name, there is still peace. So what does this mean? It means that the happiness we are chasing through people, experiences, and memories is actually our own nature shining through whenever the mind becomes quiet. Ramana said, "One must realize the self in order to open the store of unalloyed happiness." So, the spiritual journey is not about adding happiness. It is about removing the clouds that hide the sun. When the restless mind dissolves in stillness, you discover that peace was never lost. You were simply too busy thinking to notice. For many of us past 50, we've seen joy and sorrow come and go. We've loved and lost. We've achieved and failed. We've held so many expectations. And yet, amidst all that, there have been moments, quiet, simple moments, when we felt perfectly at peace for no reason. That is what Ramana called the self. It was there all along. 4. The Guru within. One day, a visitor said to Maharshi, "I want a visible guru." Ramana smiled and said softly, "The Sadguru is within." The true teacher, he said, is not a person, it is the consciousness in which all persons appear. If you look outside for salvation, you may find inspiration, but The real transformation happens when you recognize the light within. He said, grace is ever present. Your task is not to seek it, but to remove the obstacles to its flow. Grace is not something that descends from above. It arises from within, from the very self you already are. When the ego subsides, grace shines naturally. After 50 years of seeking guidance from others, perhaps the greatest discovery is this: the teacher you've been following was never outside you. Every moment of joy, every intuition, every still silence was your own inner teacher speaking all along. The guru within never leaves because it is your own self. 5. The power of silence and grace. In Talk 13, Ramana said, realization is the result of the Master's grace more than teachings, lectures, meditation, etc. Such self is ever there. Be the self, and desires and doubts will disappear. His life itself was proof of that statement. Ramana rarely spoke at length. People would sit near him in silence, and that silence transformed them more than any words could. He once said, silence is also a conversation. In that silence, the restless mind surrenders. Something greater than thought begins to act. He called it grace. Grace is not earned. It is awakened when the I relaxes. When we stop striving and simply be, the divine order unfolds naturally. That is why he said, be still and know that you are God. It's not a command. It's an invitation to return home to the natural state of being. For someone past 50, this teaching carries deep meaning. You don't have to chase enlightenment. Now it is time to be still, to rest in what you've always been. This is not giving up, it is awakening to what was never lost. 6. The states of experience. In Talk 2, Ramana explained the states of waking, dream, and deep sleep. Whatever state one is in, the perceptions partake of that state. In the waking state, the gross body perceives gross names and forms. In dream, the mental body perceives mental creations. In deep sleep, there are no perceptions. Similarly, in the transcendental state, there is nothing apart from the self. He was showing that our experiences are reflections of our identification. When we are identified with the mind, we live in duality. When we rest as awareness, there is only wholeness. This means that liberation is not a future event. It is a change of identification from I am this person to I am pure consciousness. Just as the sky is unaffected by the clouds that pass through it, the self remains untouched by the ups and downs of life. The only task, if we can call it that, is to remember the sky. When sorrow or joy arises, observe it without resistance. Know that both belong to the play of the mind. You are the awareness in which they appear. In seeing this directly, you taste freedom, not as a belief, but as your natural state. 7. The end of seeking. One visitor once asked, "Should I keep meditating and striving for realization?" Ramana answered, "Effort is needed so long as one is not aware that it is unnecessary." That may sound humorous, but it's deeply true. The spiritual path begins with effort, but ends in effortless being. We begin by seeking God and end by realizing that we are that. He said, "You are already the self. You are seeking what you already are. Therefore, your effort is only to remove the ignorance that hides it. Just as a man who has forgotten his own home searches for it everywhere, only to find it was within him all along." For seekers over 50 who have read countless books, attended retreats, meditated for years, this teaching is pure relief. You can stop seeking and start seeing, stop becoming and start being. This moment, this breath, is already it. 8. Liberation in daily life. Maharshi was once asked, "Can one realize the self while living in the world?" He smiled and said, "Why not? The world is only an appearance in the self. To know that all is the self, and that there is nothing else, is freedom. You don't have to renounce your family, your job, or your daily life. You only need to renounce the false idea that you are separate from life. Freedom is not somewhere else. It is here in the ordinary. When you wash dishes, drive, or speak to a friend, the awareness that observes all of this is your true self. In realizing that, the division between sacred and ordinary disappears. Everything becomes sacred. Ramana did not want followers. He wanted you to find yourself. He said, "You are not to become the self. You are the self." What could be simpler, yet more profound? 9. The final teaching, be still. Of all his words, perhaps none are more direct than this: be still. The aim of all spiritual practice is to still the mind. When the mind is still, the self shines. This is the essence of Ramana's message. Not to achieve something, but to be still enough to see that nothing needs to be achieved. Stillness is not dullness. It is vibrant, alive, full of peace. It is the space from which life flows effortlessly. And when you live from that space, every action becomes a meditation. Every breath becomes prayer. So let's sit for just a few breaths and allow these words to sink into silence. The self alone is. The mind rises and falls, but you, the awareness, remain unchanged. Be still. Be that. Ramana Maharshi's entire teaching can be summed up in one phrase: know the self and be free. He did not ask you to believe, but to inquire, to see, to be. He said, the self is not something newly attained. It is always there. What is new is the realization. So, wherever you are, whether sitting quietly, walking, or facing life's final chapters, remember this simple truth: you are not the one carrying the weight of life. You are the space in which life unfolds. And in that understanding, the search ends. Peace begins. If these words of Sri Ramana Maharshi have touched your heart, pause after this video. Sit in silence for a few minutes. Let the stillness speak louder than any word. This is Truthfully Free, a space for self-inquiry, awakening, and timeless wisdom. Until next time, be still, be free.